fellow class. Today we're going to be looking at the 19th century economics. We're going to be covering different types of economic systems: capitalism, communism, socialism. We're first going to begin with capitalism, which is what we use in the United States today. And capitalism, basically by definition, is the economic system, and it goes on more in your notes, but it's in the hands of private individuals or corporations who operate for a profit. The main thing about our society is money motivates us. Some people go to college so they can get a good job after they graduate from college. Some people will add on degrees to basically add more money or add more money to their paycheck. The person that wrote about capitalism, or that is known as the father of capitalism, is Adam Smith. He argued that a free market economy works to benefit everyone because it encourages the manufacture of more goods, thereby creating jobs, innovation, and lower prices on goods. So our type of economic system was supposed to help everyone in the United States, but we do have somewhat of a class system in the United States. Some may not want to admit to that, but you have the upper class, the people that are doing very well. You have the middle class, and then we do have a lower class that is not doing very well in our system of capitalism, as far as they're not making enough money to make it in our society. He also argued the visible hand of supply and demand works to regulate the markets, meaning that the government should not be that involved actively in how we run our business or what type of businesses that we open. That's why President Obama got hit hard when he tried to revamp the healthcare industry, because they saying, hey, we're not a socialist society. That's something that individuals should regulate, not government. Should be a business, not government stepping in. Same thing with the banks, the deregulation of the banks. When our economy went bad, some people say that a government should have stepped in to regulate the banks, giving out house loans, and maybe it would have prevented the house market failing. That is all like hands off, laissez-faire. So when looking at our government, or how our government works, we have to look at the law of supply and demand. How do businesses determine what price to set products? Like, how do businesses know what you're going to buy and how much you're going to buy and what price you're going to buy it at? It's called the law of supply and demand. Demand means basically our wants or our desires to get a product. So when prices go up, typically our demand will go down. We're not going to buy something for a high price unless it's an awesome product. But typically when prices go up, demand is going to go down. Versus supply, when you're looking from the business side of it, when they see prices going up, they're going to increase their supplies, because they're like, okay, if we sell more at a higher price, we'll make more money. But in reality, individuals, the consumers, people that buy the products, we're not going to buy it if it's a high price. So if you look on your notes, there is a table, it's a graph, and it shows how supply and demand works. And basically you will graph this on a sheet, on your graph, and supply is going to slope down to the right, demand is going to slope down to the right, supply is going to slope down to the left. Where they intersect at is going to be the perfect price to set that product, and it's called your equilibrium price, or it can also be called your market price, and that's what most businesses look at when they set a price. Now, if they don't reach that market price and they have a surplus of products, meaning they have more and they have yet to sell it, then they'll put that on sale. So they'll bring the price down to get rid of that product. Now, let's say they have a high demand and they completely sell out of it, then they know that maybe they should raise that price up just a little bit, and they'll use supply and demand to help set that perfect price. But the perfect price, you're not going to have a surplus and you're not going to have a shortage. There's two types of demands when we look at people or look at individuals. Think of a rubber band being elastic, how it stretches. So if you're looking at elastic, and if you see I put parentheses, this is 2B6, so that's your answer for that blank that's on your notes. But elastic products means that the price will change based on demand. Like, it constantly goes up and down depending on how the demand is for that product. So products for which demand will drop if the price increase. That is an elastic product. It doesn't matter if the price goes up, our demand is going to go down. Now, an inelastic product, and that answer is 2B7, is when the product for demand will remain the same, like people will buy it regardless of how much it costs. An example of that is oil. People need gas. So when I first started driving a car, I think gas was like 89 cents a gallon. Now it's over $3. I'm still going to spend money and purchase gas because I need it in my car. That is an inelastic product. The same thing with medicine. Depending on what kind of sickness you have, if you have to take that medicine, you're going to buy it regardless of whatever price it is. That's inelastic. I mentioned that in the beginning, laissez-faire. It is the French term that means let them do as they will. That's kind of how our government is, and the answer for that is 2C. Our government is it's somewhat hands-off. Our government still regulates like monopolies, labor unions, and you'll talk more about monopolies when you get to U.S. history next year. I'm not going to go too much in monopolies. But basically, it's like they gave them a monopoly, and our government won't let two companies, like two cell phone companies, if they're the only two cell phone companies, our government is not going to let those two cell phone companies merge together to create a monopoly, because then prices are going to be really high because they don't have any competitors. So one thing about our government, although we are a capitalistic society, our government does encourage competition between the businesses by preventing certain things from happening. But other than that, our government is hands-off on whatever type of businesses we want to create, what type of business we want to run, or how many partners we have. Our government does not regulate that. So we do have rights to private ownership. So looking at the different types of government, our economist is David Ricardo. He opposed any wage controls, and that's number 3. He described the iron law of wages, which meant that if you don't set any price controls, like minimum wage, he would be against minimum wage because that's the price control. He's saying, if we don't set any minimum wage and just let the people make as much money as they want, then therefore they will increase the size of their family, and then that generation of kids will have a whole group of workers. But because it's a whole bunch of workers, then the wages will go down. So the wages will control itself by the number of people that are being produced if you just let the wages be high in the beginning. Thomas Mathis, he said population would soon exceed the food supply. So he always advocated for people not to have big families, because he said that would hurt the economy. But the agricultural revolution prevented that from taking place, because we were able to produce mass amounts of food, our farm products, to basically carry our population. And your notes go further in about Thomas Mathis. The second form of government, we already looked at capitalism, now we're going to look at socialism. It's an economy that is heavily regulated by the government, not to the extent of a communist society. We'll talk more about that later on in this lecture video. But socialism, a country that uses socialism would be like Canada. Their government does control some aspect of the means of production in their society. Like daycare in Canada is regulated by the government. So I have a friend that lived in Canada. She said their daycare weekly cost would probably be $7 a week, versus the United States, our daycare cost can be like $300 a week. And that's because their government regulates that business. So in a socialistic society, the government is going to regulate some aspect of the business area. Versus communism, the government controls everything and basically tells the people what they are going to produce. In a socialistic society, they're still able to open up their own business. It's just heavily or more regulated by the government than in the United States. Let me make sure I'm covering everything. And then it goes on to talk about utilitarianism, which action is right as long as it produces the greatest happiness. And that's number 6 in your packet. And it further goes on in your notes to believe that an action is separate from the person who performs the action. In other words, a child who burns down a house is not a bad child, but rather a child who has done a bad thing. He also believed that the rightness of actions depend on the consequence of the action. If something has undesirable effects, it is wrong, regardless of whether or not that person had good intentions. The founder of this, economic system would be German Beekman. He called for the end of several things, and it's listed in the notes. He called for separation of church and state, which we do now in the United States. We don't teach y'all about religion in school because it's a separation. Freedom of expression, equality for women, an end to slavery, an end of corporal punishment. And corporal punishment is basically an eye for eye, Code of Hammurabi. He also fought for homosexuality in all instances where he believed that minority opinions were preventing the greater happiness. That's where he wanted separation, because he didn't want the minorities to bring down the happiness of that community. And the last one is Karl Marx and Engels. They wrote the Communist Manifesto, just like Adam Smith is going to write The Wealth of Nations, which is going to talk about capitalism and how to make capitalism work in your country. They're going to publish a book called Communist Manifesto, which is basically the blueprint for communism. And as they're talking about communism and the way society is, they said society is made up of two groups, the haves and the have-nots. The owners are going to be the haves, the bourgeoisie, and then the have-nots are the proletariats, the workers. And basically they promoted communism, and I say go over in the packet, and keep in mind I'm still putting the answers behind me so y'all know where the answers are at. Promoted communism is basically a system of government where a temporary authoritarian power, which in this case would be the government, directs the economy in order to ultimately achieve a higher social order where all property is collectively owned by the people and government is no longer necessary. And in this instance, it will be the government. Like the Soviet Union was a communist nation, the government controlled everything, every aspect of the individual's lives. They told them where they worked at. A lot of them had cooperative living situations where it'd be like 4 families that would share one kitchen, one living room. That is a communist nation. So when you look at these different types of economies, they are broken down into categories: a mixed economy, a market economy, and a command economy. Your market economy is the same thing as a capitalistic society or economy. Most countries have a market economy or democracy where the power is within the people, just like our government. They follow Adam Smith, some of his ideals, Adam Smith, in the book of The Wealth of Nations. And another name for a market economy would be free market or laissez-faire, which we've already gone over. Your command economy is going to, the government form is going to be communism. And the government is going to own most of the production, is going to tell the individual what they need to produce, what they're going to be doing. And the main authors of this would be Karl Marx and Engels, and they wrote the Communist Manifesto. But some governments, like I said, Canada, take a mixture of both of these, and it's called a mixed economy, where market and command economy are combined and create a mixed economy, which is a socialistic, or socialism is a form of government that they use. But these are going to be your 3 different types of economies, another formal name for them. And that's it for today. Make sure you study for your quiz. This information right here is not going to be on the quiz for tomorrow. All right, thank you.